All right, this is lecture number one for World War II. And we're titled Tensions Brew in Europe. We're going to talk about the rise of the dictators today. This is kind of a review from last year. We're just going to go over the big hotshots in Europe that were trying to take power. So first, we need to know what totalitarianism is. Uh, Totalitarianism is a government that maintains complete control over its citizens. It's the opposite of what we have in the United States, where we have the social contract and people ruling over themselves with elected representatives. The totalitarian state, the leader has taken control and dictates the way that life should be, and that's why they're called dictators. So individuals have no rights, and the government suppresses all opposition. So if someone tries to rise up against them, they are exterminated or eliminated. There's three types of totalitarian states that we're going to talk about. So there's fascism, Nazism, and communism. Okay, we'll talk about what these three different forms of government are all about. So the first person that we're going to talk about is Benito Mussolini, and he's from Italy. He creates a fascist state after World War One. Italy is in shambles, and there's a lot of unemployment, and a lot of money is needed to rebuild the state. So Benito Mussolini rises up. About all these rulers, they're all very passionate people and are able to grip the society and really get them to believe in what they're saying. So he practices extreme nationalism, militaristic expansion to show their power. He's charismatic, and he believes that there should be private property with strong government control. So people are still able to own property, but the government should regulate that. The next person is Adolf Hitler under Nazi Germany. We know that Germany was destroyed by the Treaty of Versailles, World War One, and then the Treaty of Versailles really crippled Germany. And with millions and millions unemployed and people in poverty and their economy in shambles, Hitler rises up and uses extreme nationalism and racism to promote his ideology and his methods to rebuild the economy. And a lot of people are kind of wonder why people followed what Hitler was doing, and he didn't really make a lot of his stuff known. Like his views on the Jewish race were known. That he did not trust them and that he was blaming them, obviously, but they didn't know about the camps. So he was able to hide that fairly well for a while. So people didn't really know what was going on. Also, if you're in that much of a struggle, like the Depression times 10, you need to find a way to get out of it, and he was offering that way to get out of it. He had a lot of government spending, a lot of government programs, getting people back to work. But the difference between what he did and what FDR did was he was more involved with rebuilding the military, and there's a lot of jobs when you need to rebuild a military, and he would spend and spend and spend. So he obviously wanted militaristic expansionism, and he was a forceful leader. He eliminated any of his enemies politically. He also believed in private property with strong government controls. He was anti-communist. He felt that communism was a bad thing, and he was going to end up siding with Joseph Stalin in the beginning, but he thinks of him as his enemy. All right, so the next one is Joseph Stalin under communist Soviet Union. Under the revolution, Stalin ends up taking over in Russia after World War One. He wants to create a sound communist state and wait for a world revolution. So he does want to spread communism across the world. He believes in a revolution by workers, and that eventually the working class will rule. But that never happens in a communist government. People have to be in charge. If not, there's going to be a lawlessness, anarchy type state. And he believes in state ownership of property, and that's kind of the idea of what communism is the state owns everything, and everyone just uses what the state has. Everyone participates equally, and that's kind of communism in a nutshell. And so these three guys really want to spread their ideology across the world. We have one more person, a country that was rising up out of the First World War, and that's Japan. They're kind of thought of as less of a threat. They're kind of just this little tiny island, but they really started rising up in military power. And they're led by Hideki Tojo. They have an emperor. His name is Emperor Hirohito. But Tojo is really the leader. Hirohito is kind of just a figurehead at this point. He wants to expand Japan, but Tojo has most of the power. So he's chief of the army. He is resourceful. He leads in the industrialization of Japan, and he plans to take the mainland, and he ends up taking Manchuria, and which is the hotbed of China, as far as resources go, and people all throughout history have fought over Manchuria. And he went and took that over as a part of aggression. This is 1931, so early on in the war, or like this, they consider this to be the beginning of the war, but it's really early on. And then other things start happening across Europe. All right, so as I say, Japan invades China. Italy starts to take Ethiopia and other parts of Africa. And if we know kind of the history of Italy and Mussolini, they get upset after World War I. They believe that they should have been entitled to some territories after World War One, and they don't really get much. So this is kind of like the push that they have is to kind of start taking Ethiopia. The League of Nations was created, and we know that we did not support the League of Nations, and they were supposed to have a collective resistance to all acts of unprovoked aggression, but this doesn't happen with Japan, it doesn't happen with Italy, and it doesn't happen with Nazi Germany. They don't do anything to step in, so they really haven't done their job. And so this is kind of the idea of appeasing these guys, letting them do what they want as long as it stops at that point, but obviously it doesn't work like that. There's also a civil war going on in Spain. The nationalists are trying to overthrow the government. Francisco Franco, he leads the revolts, and there's a quote that says, we just knew that Spain was a place to stop fascism. And if the democratic governments could have stopped fascism in Spain, maybe it wouldn't have spread out through the world as it did during World War II. They were supported by Nazi Germany. There were raids. Hitler he raided and bombed parts of Spain in order to try to help promote fascism. Just as the rest of the world should have helped to stop it, he wanted to promote it. He knew he needed more allies as these democracies stay neutral. So there's a really famous painting called Guernica, painted by Pablo Picasso, and it kind of portrays the bombing of Guernica, Spain, during the Spanish Civil War by German and Italian bombers, and it shows the suffering of the civilians. So here's the painting. Interesting painting. Obviously, Picasso does some impressionism and some stuff that is kind of hard to understand if you don't really know art very well. But this was a huge representation. It's a really large painting. It's more of a mural, and they were able to move it around the country and show it. But it's just supposed to show the suffering of the civilians. The lights up here are supposed to represent the bombers coming in. And just to give you an idea of how large the painting is, here's Picasso painting it. So you can see the how massive it really is. All right, that's it for the Rise of the Dictators.